Hey everyone, if you watched my last episode, I spoke about the making of Starchaser, The Legend of Oren, and I know, I spent a long time on the making of this movie, but unfortunately, in my opinion, that was far more interesting than the actual film. A lot of people have already ragged on this film, and I wanted to dig more into it and see why they wanted to make a blatant ripoff of Star Wars. It definitely turned into a fun project for me, because I got to find out more about the Korean animation industry. I really enjoy Korean dramas, and so I really love learning more about their culture and history. So let's be honest here, I really enjoy learning about various Asian cultures in general. And I wouldn't necessarily consider myself a weeb since I don't just focus on anime or Japanese culture, since I just mentioned about K-dramas, obviously. But anyways, thanks to this movie, I really gained a desire to learn more about the Korean animation industry, and I hope to gain more knowledge as I continue to go down this new direction for my channel. I am truly excited, and even though the movie is such a poorly written ripoff of Star Wars, I still respect the hell out of Stephen Hahn, and you know why? Because he was willing to produce this film when even to this day, Korean animation is still primarily used for outsourcing work with countries like Japan and the US. I could go on about this for a long time, but I know what you want to hear about. You want me to dig deep into this movie and tell you why or why not you should see this movie, and I'm going to do that now. The movie starts out with the lead character, Oren, who is a young slave on a planet named Trinia. He lives underground with his fellow bondsmen mining crystals for a god named Zygon. The so-called god is good at hiding his real identity and uses his robot army to enforce the people to mine instead of doing it themselves, even though they would probably be more efficient than a meat bag. Later on, you will find out why Zygon hates these humans and doesn't have his own robots doing all the mining. And let me just tell you, those robot minions act a lot like humanoids. I'm telling you, those things move around like they're human beings and they talk to each other like they're humans. They don't act like droids from Star Wars or anything else you've seen before. It feels like they were originally designed to be just foot soldiers like stormtroopers, but they decided to call them robots when they started recording the movie. That's just my opinion. It seems pretty obvious, but I could be wrong. Anyways, Oren finds a jeweled sword while mining the rocks, and Hops, who is the grandfather of Oren's girlfriend Elan, recognizes the sword immediately. He gives his life, no one knows why, but he gives his life to save Oren and to keep the sword a secret. And I just have to tell you, man, did he really die a pointless death? There was no reason whatsoever for him to whack that robot in the head. The robot had no clue what was going on, and Oren could have easily hid the sword. Even Elan says in the movie that her grandfather's death was pointless. It's just something that really pissed me off. It just felt like they just pointlessly killed the character just to kill the character. It did not make sense plot-wise. They just used it as an excuse to move the plot forward, but they didn't have to go that route. They just wanted to kill the character. So, after the pointless death, we finally get to find more about this supposed magical sword. So, Oren grabs onto the sword, and it magically ascends into the air. And once it does that, it just all of a sudden dives down and buries itself into the cavern floor. And a projection of an old man appears from the blade that looks kind of like Space Jesus, or Ewan McGregor's Obi-Wan Kenobi. This Space Jesus guy starts telling the mole people that above the caverns is a magnificent universe that the people may find. And then the blade disappears. Not the hilt, just the blade, and it explains nothing about this guy. No one knows who he is. Why are we supposed to trust this? They could all assume that they're just all on drugs right now. After all of that, Oren and Elan set out to discover this universe and find the blade to this sword. Oren's young blind brother, Callie, keeps wanting to go with Oren, and he complained how Oren doesn't want him around because he's blind, which, honestly, Oren completely ignores that comment, probably because he didn't want to say no because you're too freaking annoying and you're being a total cockblock, bro. So Callie keeps chasing after his brother anyway, slowing them down, trying to escape the caverns. They get chased by Zygon's robots. They go through what's supposed to be a furnace for these crystals. By the way, they do leave Callie behind. I guess he wasn't worried about them killing his little brother. It sure didn't seem that way. Anyways, they go through that furnace, and of course, they're completely fine because they end up in an industrial complex where they meet Zygon, who reveals the face of a human man beneath his mask, like it was supposed to be real impactful or something, when we literally just met the character. And on a side note, Zygon totally reminded me of a G.I. Joe villain whenever I saw him. And funny enough, 4 out of 5 of the animators actually did work on G.I. Joe. So after poor Elan just literally lost her grandfather, Zygon decides to go ahead and strangle Elan to death. If it wasn't enough that she just lost her grandfather, she dies too. Well, I guess she's at least with him now, because useless Oren just watches her die while he escapes everything. Because Zygon, of course, gets distracted by the MacGuffin, which is the sword hilt. And during all of this going on, Zygon's robots accidentally fire on a crystal deposit. And of course, because of where Oren was during all this, Zygon presumes that he's dead from the explosion in a cave-in from the area nearby. And yeah, the minions, they have terrible aim. Sounds familiar. Maybe like the stormtroopers from Star Wars, right? Oren digs a tunnel to the surface of Trinia with apparently a mining beam that has like infinite energy. Why do you give slaves such high-tech equipment? And you give the robots that are in charge of them laser whips to keep them in check. Well, I guess even Zygon understood the robots were about as useless as a plug nickel when it came to shooting a gun. After Oren uses that infinite laser beam, he makes it to the surface and is later captured by mandroids. These things are cool. They're a group of decaying, half-organic, half-robotic beings who intend to tear him apart and use his body parts to replace their own. These dudes, like I said, are one of the coolest creature designs in the entire film. They look like something out of a horror animated film, and they are so goofy fighting over his body parts because their body is missing limbs or one has vampire-looking teeth. So that particular one keeps going on about how he's going to pull out Oren's teeth. It's easily one of my favorite parts of the film. I wish they would expand upon stuff like that. But unfortunately, that is not the direction they went. What they ended up doing was Oren's sword hilt, again, the MacGuffin, makes what's apparently an invisible blade. So with that invisible blade, one of the mandroids is messing around with the sword and accidentally kills the 2 other mandroids, and then thinks Oren is like some sort of wizard or something, and it's one of the weirdest pacing moments of the film. Here, just take a look.
You're doing this? This is human magic.
No, I didn't. Yes, you're right. It is human magic. I can kill you the same as I killed the other 2. Stop!
Like, what the heck? It is so awkward, because, like, Oren's 1 second thinking, no, that's not me, and then the next second he's like, yes, it was me. I killed those other 2 mandroids, and it makes no sense. It's such a quick switch that it's like, what the heck? They did not give him a chance to change his mind or even think about it. It is so weird. And the other annoying thing about the whole film is the sword clearly works for Oren. He's the only one that can produce this invisible blade, but for whatever reason, he can't figure it out. But after that whole situation, Oren escapes and runs into a human smuggler named Dag Dimbry. I think I said his name right. You know I'm terrible with names. And with Dag, who I swear to God is them trying to imitate Marlon Brando during his early days with a cigar, accent, and everything. They must have heard about how someone from The Godfather almost played Han Solo, but instead of hearing it was Al Pacino, they heard it was Marlon Brando, and they thought it would be funny. But guess what? It's not. His character is so annoying. He dubs Oren Water Snake. And it's like he does it so many times. And the reason he dubs Oren Water Snake is for his outrageous tale about human slaves in the mines, because everybody thinks robots does it, because that would make sense. But that's not what's going on. And so Dag calls him water snake so many times in the film, it's ridiculous. I swear it meant to be some weird sexual innuendo. And with this weird Dag guy that keeps calling Oren a water snake, Oren decides to go along with this guy. He goes on a journey with Dag to smuggle crystals. And with all this, eventually Dag seizes a load of crystals from a hovering freighter, but is driven away by Zygon and his robotic guards. And it's such a stupid scene. Like, he has a group of robots himself, and they go down there, and they basically kill a whole bunch of these other robots. And then Zygon shows up, and he's this one guy with one regular old gun, and Dag has like 4 or 5 robots, and for whatever reason, they don't shoot Zygon. It's like the perfect opportunity to kill the bad guy, but he doesn't. But he does get away. Eventually, Dag seizes a load of crystals from a hovering freighter above during all this crazy nonsense and is driven away by Zygon and what is left of Zygon's robotic guards. And when Oren and the crew are getting away, Zygon makes an odd little comment.
It is him. The Kakan has returned.
What on earth is a Kakan? Well, I'll explain all of that later. During the fight with Zygon, the stupid fight that totally could have ended easily, but, we got to keep the plot going, Dag seizes a fembot named Silica and uses Silica as a shield from the laser blast. After all that, he reprograms Silica, and she becomes attached to him, and let me just show you the scene so you know what I mean by reprogram.
They're in her posterior.
You wouldn't dare.
Help! 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 What?
There. That should do it.
Hi.
That's more like it.
Yeah, they really like butts in this movie, and Dag really likes that fembutt. And the way to a fembutt's metal heart is through her. Well, you get the joke. YouTube, you're not going to strike me down for an inappropriate joke this time. Let's get back on track. Dag flies his spaceship, the Starchaser, which is pretty cool. It's the one thing that's used with the 3D pen that I mentioned about in the previous episode. And with that Starchaser, he goes to a city called Toga Togo on the planet Borgodon. I don't know. I just butchered it. Just make fun of me in the comments below. But he decides, after Oren and everything just saved him, he decides, I'm just going to abandon this water snake. And he gives Silica to a slave auctioneer. Not very shocking, He's a smuggler. He's supposed to be like Han Solo, pretend like he doesn't care. Oren wanders through the city, trying to find a clue that will lead him to the location of the hilt's blade, after meeting a fortune teller who tells him to visit a place called Nova Luna. It was very obvious she was one of those stereotypical bad fortune tellers that was making up things as they go. And during all this, Dag meets with another stereotype. It's a black market trade leader known as Maghreb. That's clearly supposed to be Jabba, and they kind of make him I want to say Middle Eastern sleazy stereotype from old movies. And with him being the Jabba of the story, he agrees to buy the crystals. After the agreement, he tells him that he will meet him at the Fahaji Desert, and he just goes on about his way. Oren sees Silica with the slave trader, and of course she's on sale right now. She's being auctioned off. He's obviously concerned because he's a simple-minded, stereotypical, new to the world protagonist. And he offers high prices to buy her because he does not understand the concept of money. He's lived in the mines. He knows nothing about money. All he's gotten is stuff from his god. And so this is where he meets a character who essentially looks just like his ex that just died, Elaine. Or, my bad, Elan. And her name is Princess Aviana. I don't know. I don't know how to say her name. I'm not even going to try. It was probably something really simple, but again, I'm terrible at pronouncing things. Anyways, along with her annoying C-3PO knockoff droid, they try to bid for Silica as well, with no real reason, just so that way they can introduce her early for no real good plot reason. Just so that way you kind of get a hint that she's going to be one of the main characters. Of course, during all this, Dad comes back because he wants to get his money from the cell, and of course he sees Oren, and Oren's being a total idiot trying to buy this robot he cannot afford, and he tells Mr. Watersnake that he can't help him any, but then he starts feeling bad. You got to give your smuggler a heart. You got to do the Han Solo plot. You got to do the same thing that they did with Han Solo for your Han Solo, very obvious, terrible knockoff that talks like Marlon Brando, which Marlon Brando is great. Don't get me wrong. He's an awesome actor. Love The Godfather. Love a lot of other things that he's been in. He's, a legend. But making a very terrible, generic version of him in a movie that just doesn't fit, it just makes the experience that much worse. And the movie is pretty bad. I really hated watching this movie more than once, but to get through this movie, I had to watch it multiple times because I kept spacing out because I'm like, dear God, this movie is so dumb. I would rather go watch one of the original Star Wars movies, not episode 8 or 9. So with the smuggler that's starting to get the heart of gold, he has Oren and Silica go with him to go meet the Jabba-like character who's not actually there. Instead, he has 2 of his mercenaries there to kill them off. Of course, he got a bounty from Zygon. So they had to have their random bounty hunters that are supposed to be like Boba Fett, but they're very generic. They're not even cool, and they're only in there for like 5 seconds. They give him the treasure for the crystals, and it has a bomb in it. And instead of just throwing out the bomb towards them, they throw, because there is money in there, there is gold. They grab the box and they throw the box at the people instead of saving the money. They could have thrown the bomb by itself, but no, for whatever reason, they threw the whole box. And of course, with all this, it kind of helps move the plot forward, right? Yeah, for whatever reason, Dag agrees to Oren to go to Nova Luna, but they are shot down all of a sudden by Zygon soldiers. Dag is captured and the ship is useless at this point. Oren is thrown far off, and then out of nowhere, the princess comes, and she turns out to be the daughter of the Borgadon's governor, and apparently that makes you a princess in this world. And after he's saved by her, he wakes up, and there's a lot of weird sexual references made by her droid. He basically is telling Oren, don't get any funny ideas, and Oren is clueless. And also, it's a pretty funny scene because when Oren wakes up, he doesn't see the princess's face. He sees Alon's face at first instead. And they're actually voiced by the same actress, so I don't know if they meant it as a joke or what. And I couldn't decide whether it was smart or just lazy. So after Oren wakes up, he tells the princess his story. And so they decide to go all of a sudden to this handy-dandy library archive, and it reveals that the hilt has historically been used by a group of legendary guardians called the Kakan. They were meant to vanquish threats to humanity. Among these threats was a tyrant called Nexus Xenu, after whose defeat the hilt vanished until Oren's discovery of it. The interesting part about this scene is that the writer Jeffrey Scott snuck in his Scientology beliefs. You see, in 1965, L. Ron Hubbard, the creator of Scientology, issued the policy letter HCOPL1, September 1965. It's entitled Ethics Protection. In it, he states that ethics actions are often used to handle individual statistics. A person who is not doing his job becomes an ethics target, and goes on in detail how a Scientologist can protect himself from ethics punishment by being more productive and keeping statistics up. You see, the Kakan is a status in the Scientology church that is not a rank, but they are entitled to be forgiven of the death penalty 10 times in case in the future he did anything wrong. That's what producing high statistic staff members are, Kakans. They can get away with murder without a blink from ethics. Also, Xenu, according to Scientology, was the ruler of a galactic confederacy 75 million years ago, which consisted of 26 stars and 76 planets, including Earth, which was then known as T-Gigak. The planets were overpopulated, containing an average population of 178 billion. The Galactic Confederacy civilization was comparable to our own, with aliens walking around in clothes which looked very remarkably like the clothes they wear this very minute, and using cars, trains, and boats looking exactly the same as those circa 1950 to 1960 on Earth. Within the Church of Scientology, the Xenu story is part of the church's secret advanced technology. It's considered a sacred and esoteric teaching, which is normally only revealed to members who have completed a lengthy sequence of courses costing large amounts of money. The church avoids mention of Xenu in public statements and has gone to considerable effort to maintain the story's confidentiality, including legal action on the grounds of copyright and trade secrecy. Officials of the Church of Scientology widely deny or try to hide Xenu's story. Despite this, much material Xenu has leaked to the public via court documents and copies of Hubbard's notes that have been distributed through the internet. So hopefully, no one from this organization comes after a no-name YouTuber, since one of their own puts it into a major motion animated picture. Anyways, enough about Scientology. Let's get back to the movie. The princess takes Oren to Trinia, where he again faces Zygon. And Oren attempts to kill Zygon for Alon's death, because apparently Alon matters to him again, even though he literally moved on to the princess in a matter of days. Anyways, Oren exposes Zygon actually as a robot, and then Zygon reveals he's really Nexus Xenu. I'm sorry, I know, I'm talking about the Scientology thing again, but this whole movie is revolved loosely around Scientology. I can't help that the writer was so lazy that he made it so obvious that it was about his own religion and didn't actually make some good plot lines. Anyways, he's Nexus Xenu, and he's seeking again to rule over humanity with his army of robots. Zygon, or rather Xenu, takes Oren's hilt and has Oren and the princess put into a cell block where Dag was being held. Which is very stupid. Why would you put everyone in the same spot together? It's not like they were out of rooms. Who else have they got in those rooms reserved for? The Space Jesus cult? It just didn't make much sense to me. So do you remember the hilt, the MacGuffin of this story? You know, the powerful sword that Oren was trying to find the blade for and Zygon just stole? Well, you see what happened with that was the Starfly thing that I might not have mentioned about, but there's been a Starfly that's been around throughout the movie that gets on Dag's nerves. Anyways, so the Starfly brings Oren the hilt, which he uses to free himself and Dag. You see, Zygon had just taken the princess hostage, so all that was left was Dag and Oren. So they escaped, and for this hilt to be this all-powerful sword, Zygon did a terrible job keeping up with it. He just left it on a console with no one keeping an eye on it. Why would you do that? You just got it. You had to go through all of these hoops to get it from this no-name miner from your slave world. Anyways, so Oren and Dag enter Zygon's flagship and takes control of it, using it, again, aided by the Starfly, to destroy the enemy fleet. They're rejoined by the robot Silica, who has restored the Starchaser. Oren and his friends penetrate Zygon's base, but are attacked by his remaining troops, while Dag and Silica stay behind to fight off their pursuers. Oren enters his original cavern home and begins to denounce Zygon as a god, but is interrupted by Zygon himself. They fight, resulting in Oren dangling over a chasm while Zygon gloats over him. As Oren hangs over the chasm, 3 starflies appear and merge into one, but instead of giving him the hilt at his request, it states that he has no need of the hilt, adding that there was never a blade. So obvious. Duh. So we find out that Oren is essentially Kuwabara from Yu Yu Hakusho, except without the cool pompadour and likable personality.
A mulberry is a tree, Kuwabara is a man, and I'll prove it. We all have to die when our time comes, but if we do our duty, we don't got regrets. So taste a little piece of my sword, Tagoro.
Oren finally realizes that he has the power to channel his spirit energy to create a spirit sword, then pulls himself up and uses it to cut Zygon in half, sending him plummeting to his doom in the lava-filled chasm below. Oren's people rise in revolt and win their freedom. Above, Silica mistakenly fires a laser blast from the Starchaser into the accumulated crystals above, causing them to explode and triggering a chain reaction which threatens to collapse the mines. Oren chunks the hilt like a grenade to open a fissure, which his people run up to Trinia's surface, where Oren uses his newfound power to heal his little brother. You remember his annoying little blind brother? Well, he heals his brother Callie of his blindness like he is Jesus suddenly, because why not? After Oren suddenly gains his healing abilities, several starflies reveal themselves to be the spirits of the previous Kakan, including the elder man of the hilt's projection. So I guess Obi-Wan Kenobi had to tell his Luke Skywalker that he did a good job. They invite Oren to join them, but he refuses for the time being, in favor of living with his friends and family. The other Kakans respect Oren's choice and leave him as they fly into the starry beyond. This totally reminded me of the scene in Disney's Hercules where he can finally ascend to be a god, but he decides to stay on Earth with Meg. Except with this movie, it made no sense and left no impact to the conclusion of the film. The film's credits roll over a constellation of the bladeless sword hilt, of course. So let's get to the conclusion. In conclusion, you can tell there was a lot of effort when it came from the art department. They really evoked some other cult classic art styles, such as heavy metal or fire and ice, with gorgeous backdrops that looked like they belonged to 80s rock albums. The animation department really made you love the designs of their more creative ideas like the Mandroids. But when it came to writing, well, for a movie written by a guy who won Emmys on previous work, you can tell he dialed it in when it came to this one. It had a very generic plot that took most of the beats from Star Wars, and it did a terrible job at building up the climax of the film. Everything fell flat because there was basically no build-up, or the ideas seemed to be random plot devices just to keep the movie going forward. So, do I recommend watching this movie? Sure. If you want to see a nostalgic B-rated sci-fi flick that had some great animation work done, I'd say, why not? It's not a terrible movie, it's just a movie that fell flat. It had potential that was squandered thanks to poor writing and an agenda to add a writer's religious belief without making any sense to the film. But I'd also say, check out some other great animated films from the 80s, like the ones I mentioned in this video. And I really hope you enjoyed learning more about a forgotten film that no one asked or cared for. But I found the backstory to be very interesting, and who knows what the future holds. There's apparently a live-action remake in the works, and hopefully they don't copy off the new Star Wars movies for that one. Thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and as I always say, thank you for letting me get to the root of my geek culture with you.